Good morning. I'm Rebecca Reimel, the president of the Pew Charitable Trust, and it's a real pleasure to welcome you here today on behalf of all of my colleagues, and particularly Joshua Reichert, who ably leads all of our environmental work. We are here for a conversation between two remarkable women who each, in their own way, have made enormous contributions to the public's understanding of science, space, and our fragile yet beautiful planet. Our guests are Dr. Kathleen Sullivan, scientist, astronaut, teacher, civic leader, and now administrator of the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, and Lynn Schur, a renowned ABC News correspondent who has covered the space program and recently authored the best-selling biography, Sally Ride, America's First Woman in Space. I'd also like to acknowledge Rear Admiral John White, who is with us, who is oceanographic and navigator of the Navy, is a critical partner for NOAA, and I want to thank him for joining us as well. And I have one more welcome and a personal note. As we all know, behind every successful woman, there is a supportive man. And I think that's how the quote goes, isn't it? And given our friendship and productive partnership, I know this is totally true of Senator John Warner. I want to tell a very quick story. It was a year ago that he and I had the privilege of visiting the Naval Academy and meeting with an extraordinary group of midshipmen, many of them women. John related a story of a call he received when he was Secretary of the Navy from his boss, President Nixon. He gave him a tall order to make haste in admitting women to all of the military academies where women had not been allowed since their founding more than a century earlier. He eagerly embraced the mandate from his commander-in-chief. Thanks to then Secretary Warner's efforts, 39 years ago, just yesterday, Congress enacted Public Law 94-106, which included a requirement that the United States military academies would admit the first women in their fall class of 1976. There were 81 women in that first class at the Naval Academy. This year's class had over 300. So, Senator, thank you for your leadership on so many important matters, including supporting women's role in leading and defending this great country of ours. As head of NOAA, Dr. Sullivan is leading by example and has used the idea of resilience as an organizing principle for protecting our oceans and our coastlines. I cannot think of anyone whose life and record of accomplishment better illustrates putting vision and strength of conviction and resilience into action than hers. As many of you know, Dr. Sullivan was only 32 as a mission specialist when she became the first American woman to walk in space. This year marks the 30th anniversary of that historic step forward for the American space program, for our nation, and yes, for women. But living and working in space is only one chapter of her extraordinary journey. After 15 years of distinguished service at NASA, Dr. Sullivan was appointed chief scientist at NOAA, overseeing a wide array of research and technology programs, and beginning an impressive career with the agency charged with exploring, understanding, and protecting our world's oceans. Starting in 2000, we had the privilege of working with her when she was a member of the Pew Oceans Commission, along with its able chair, Leon Panetta, Jane Lubchenco, and other leaders from science, government, and the conservation community. The Commission issued its report in 2003, giving new urgency to protecting our oceans, spurring the creation of America's first oceans policy, and helping to win bipartisan support in Congress for science-based limits on fishing. Today, thanks to her leadership, the United States has one of the best managed fisheries in the world. She was honored this year as one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. John Glenn wrote, "I believe my good friend Kathy is the right person for the right job at the right time." Through her public service career, she's been a leading advocate for the role of science in informing and shaping public policy. So Kathy, I want to take this opportunity to personally thank you and congratulate you and your colleagues at NOAA for your partnership with Pew and the environment community, and for your pivotal role in a series of wins for the ocean, not the least of which was the announcement just recently that President Obama will expand the Pacific Remote Islands Marine National Monument, and it will be huge, even bigger than Texas. So thank you for all of your leadership. I mentioned Dr. Sullivan's historic 1984 walk in space. Also on board the Challenger that day was another brilliant scientist and astronaut, Sally Ride. For all of us who grew up mesmerized and inspired by America's space program, Sally Ride is a familiar name. But the person who truly knows the story of her incredible journey into space is with us today, Lynn Schur. Lynn is an award-winning broadcaster and writer, contributor to Parade magazine, and a trailblazer for women in her own right. She received numerous awards, including an Emmy and 2 American Women in Television's Commendation Awards. In addition to reporting on politics and her work on ABC's 2020, Lynn has covered NASA's Space Shuttle program from its inception. In reviewing this biography, the columnist Sally Jenkins wrote, Lynn Schur's Sally Ride is a vibrant, honest, and at long last complete portrait of the woman who bucked history, changed the space agency, and helped alter her country. I want to offer 2 women who have bucked history and altered the course of this country. But before I do, there is someone else, another successful female leader who couldn't be with us today, but wants to offer a word. Secretary of Commerce, Penny Pritzker. I think we have her on video.
Kathy, I am so sorry that I cannot be there today, but I am so glad that Pew is taking this opportunity to honor the 30th anniversary of your historic spacewalk. Your career, your record, and your achievements make you a role model and a pioneer, a dedicated public servant, an innovator, and a renowned scientific mind. Your work has earned you a series of accolades and landed you among Time magazine's 100 most influential people. Your story deserves this moment of recognition. As you have told me in the past, 30 years ago, when you took your walk in space, you gazed back at our planet and gained a deep sense of personal commitment to further explore the many facets of the Earth's system. Your commitment led you from that moment to today, and as you lead NOAA's efforts as America's Environmental Intelligence Agency. It is hard to beat a job that puts you 380 miles up in space, but I know firsthand that you bring the same passion and dedication to NOAA as you once did to your spacewalk. Kathy, each time I hear it, I am inspired by your story. I am proud to work with you at the Department of Commerce. I am honored to call you a colleague and friend. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with our country and for serving the American people. Congratulations on reaching this remarkable milestone.
Here, I am Lynn Schur, and I just want to say before I get started, Kathy and I have known each other for a number of years, so I'm going to call her Kathy and not Dr. Sullivan, and that way she doesn't have to call me Ms. Schur either. Anniversary, October 11th, 1984. An amazing woman did an amazing thing. She did something no American woman had ever done before, and she did it before a nation that watched with bated breath. I am not talking about Kathy's spacewalk. I am talking about the fact that that was also the date of Geraldine Ferraro's debate with Vice President George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush. The first time that a woman was running for vice president on a major party ticket, the first time such a woman debated a sitting vice president. I was covering the debate that night for ABC News, which is why I missed anchoring Kathy's EVA, one of the only early shuttle missions I did not cover. But I bring it up to make a larger point, which Rebecca has referred to and the Secretary has also referred to. The era during which Catherine Sullivan joined NASA with 5 other women and flew to such glory was a very special time in our history. It was a time of change that was liberating to some and uncomfortable to others. These women carried the hopes and dreams of millions who saw their bold journey as their own tickets to success. And Kathy's great accomplishment is not only that she helped shatter that ultimate glass ceiling, but that she did it so magnificently, and that she grew and then she gave back, and she continues to serve this country and this planet. What's even more extraordinary is that when you look back, doing what she is doing now is precisely what she trained for. It's precisely what she always wanted to do, although it wasn't always necessarily obvious. And it was certainly not easy until the social changes that came about that welcomed women like her into its top ranks. We are very lucky that Kathy Sullivan is running NOAA, and we are especially lucky to get her perspective here today.
Thanks,
so
Lynn.
welcome to you. And by the way, happy birthday.
Well, thank you. Thank you. A few days. The first week of October, thank you.
Yeah, it was a couple days ago, but
The first week of October is always a nice drum roll of birthday and launch date and spacewalk.
there you go. There you go.
I have to comment on your Geraldine Ferraro story, by the way, because Sally and I and everyone in the office followed that, avidly, of course. And a friend of mine some years later ordered for me one of the What Was Happening This Day front pages of the New York Times. And to my astonishment, the picture and story about Mrs. Ferraro's debate is in the lower right hand, and a very grainy black and white screenshot from the analog closed-circuit TV of me slipping out of the hatch is above the fold on the upper left. So same page as Geraldine on the same day. It's
Right.
not bad company.
I would also say it worked out a little better for Kathy than it did for Jerry, but that's another story. So we are indeed going to be speaking about Kathy's work at NOAA and the extraordinary plan she's got for this country and this planet. But I want to go back a little bit to the space days first and just get a little recollection. 30 years ago was her spacewalk, but she got to NASA in 1978 in that first class of shuttle astronauts. There were 35 of them. They called themselves 35 new guys, and of the 35 new guys, 6 were women, and there were a couple of minority men. And Kathy, I know that this was not something that anybody could have prepared you for. I think people don't realize how extraordinary it was for women to be there after almost 25 years of a space program. When you first got to NASA for that first press conference, you were a graduate student. How did you deal with, I wasn't there yet, I hadn't yet been assigned. How did you deal with it?
Well, it was pretty crazy. I mean, NASA had also not welcomed astronauts for about 9 years. So NASA was pretty much out of practice. And the last time they welcomed them in, it was a class that ended up called the XS-11 because the Apollo program wound down and a lot of people didn't fly. So NASA's really figuring this out as well. And I don't think NASA realized even quite what the reaction would be with 2 African Americans, an Asian American, and 6 women. And we were certainly clueless. Sally, Steve Hawley, me, we were 26-year-old graduate students who were thrilled to be selected as astronauts, but all the rest of the stuff was beyond our imagining. And I was, on top of that, living in Nova Scotia, Canada. So Canada doesn't react overly much to the selection of the United States astronauts. So it's
to anything.
Well, yes, there's that. But so there's this little bit of sort of radio silence around me, and here you go. So we parachuted into Houston, 35 of us, largely meeting each other for the first time, unless you had interviewed with someone. And it was this orchestrated day of everything from the welcome, here's how it works, here's your paperwork, to now we're going to present you to the press. All of us grad students were probably, the shoestring doesn't begin to describe it. I think I was grossing $3,000 a year. American. So there's this wide range of capabilities and economics aboard. Our class was 26 years old to 39 years old. So they array us in rows on stage, and they do everything by name, snap, snap, snap for the photos. And from about, let me guess, 11 a.m. till whenever was a block of time described as media availability. From 11:02 a.m. onward, 25 guys were out the door and done, because no one was interested in them. They'd seen astronauts like that before. And 6 women and 2 African American men and an Asian American man we were there all the way through the primetime news hour. So from that time forward, we categorized ourselves as 10 interesting people and 26 standard white guys.
It was a very odd time for you folks. And keep in mind, before Sally Ride became the first American woman to fly, before these 6 women got there, the only females NASA had sent into space were 2 spiders and a monkey. So this was, this was a very big deal. So you start to train. Oh, wait a minute. Let's just go back to that first day. You and the other women kind of bonded that first day.
Well, yeah, so there was quite a prominent figure in our world at that time named Carolyn Huntoon, and you know Carolyn and write about her in the book, who somewhat self-appointed herself mentor and den mother to the 6 of us. I mean, again, we were quite young. We'd never been in this before.
She was the highest-ranking female at the Johnson Space Center. She was a biochemist who had been denied promotions herself because she was female. So they bring the women in and they say, Caroline, you take care of them.
She had been attached to the center director's staff to help shepherd this all through. And she had already saved our bacon on a couple of fronts. As the office began to figure out how do you, let's see, there is an astronaut gym and it has a locker room. Oh, that's right, it only has a locker room. It's probably going to need 2 locker rooms. And getting that all fitted out. And they would trot Carolyn out to say, our locker's this big, acceptable. And all of those little things about how to lay out a ladies' locker room and so forth. She was fending off a lot of the craziness. What is the dress code for women astronauts? Well, what is the dress code for male astronauts? Oh, well, you never give a dress code to male astronauts. They're astronauts after all. I said, well, I think you have your answer. But what if they wear something we don't like? Well, what if the guys wear something we don't like? Well, you never say anything to male astronauts. Well, I think you have your answer. What if one of their husbands doesn't want to move? Well, what if one of the wives doesn't want to move? Oh, that's not our business. I think you have your answer. So she had been through round and round of that before we even arrived. And she took us to the side before this big press availability moment and just sort of painted the landscape for all of us who'd never been in the press before. We were similar in a lot of ways, but different in others. And it's kind of fun to tell your story, but she had to remind us that the likes of Lynn Scher are not actually your best friends. And they're not asking you these questions because they're genuinely interested. They're asking to try to find some juice that will pump their byline. And you just might want to think about where you want to try to set the line of what part of your life is a public life and what is a private life. And being 6 of you, they're going to be looking for who will be the most forthcoming about their personal life, their intimate life, their finances, whatever it is. And then try to push against the others to say, well, so-and-so told me this, why won't you talk about that? So just heads up and be alert to that. So we each scattered off to our first...
This is what qualified as media training in NASA in 1978.
This was media training at that point. That was the totality. So we all scatter off for our first 10 minutes, this is speed dating stuff, our first 10 minutes with somebody. And we're coming back out, I think all of us just a little bit wide-eyed at this point. And I think it was Sally and I were coming from 2 directions in the corridor where, as it happens, the ladies' room is. And we saw Anna down the other way. And we said, ladies' room? And we all jumped into the ladies' room and grabbed the other 3 in because all the journalists were male. And so we had a little debrief meeting in the ladies' room for a few minutes between each session. So-and-so's looking for this, and he's looking for that, and watch out for this, and what did you decide to share? And just sort of triangulated our mutual agreement of a safe space for that first round of interviews. So every interview was followed by a bailout into the ladies' room.
There is strength in numbers,
indeed. There is strength in numbers.
I actually think NASA was very wise in selecting in adding 6 of you and not making it just one person.
That is one of the things they did a lot of work to understand, that if you're going to bring a new cultural dimension basically into an organization, you cannot do it with too small a number, because it is such a different thing, however stark or mild the contrast is. It's just so different, and you will be so isolated in that different mode. And so you need to give some strength, and you also need to let the larger world see this is not a monotone. There's not just one way. There's not one woman who is an archetype for all of womankind. So you need both, a little bit of variety and variation of example, and some mutual support in the group that's different.
So let's talk a little bit about the training. I should also add that when Sally was chosen as the first, she did she brought all of you guys in, the other women, to help make certain decisions about what was going to be taken. And one of my favorite moments is the, I'm not telling that story, was in their little toilet, yes, in their, you can read it, in the personal toiletries kit they took, the women got together and they got NASA finally to get rid of the Old Spice men's aftershave and the British Sterling deodorant, so that more female-friendly lotions and potions. And they got the addition of something that only NASA could call hair restraints. We call them rubber bands. Yeah. So things went along.
But I just spend a moment and imagine the fuller range of a cadre of 1960s male engineers designing a feminine hygiene kit, and we'll leave it at that.
And then
read the book.
And then, thank you. And then, of course, Sally flew, and Sally flew so wonderfully and did such a great job that it took a lot of pressure off of the idea of a woman in space. Any one of the 6 would have been a marvelous first American woman in space. They chose Sally. But it opened a door, and some of the dumb questions, not all of them, but some of the awkwardness went away. So now you're training, and the training is exactly the same for the women as for the men, no difference. And now you get named to a flight, and you also are told you're doing an EVA, an extravehicular activity. She's going to be the first American woman. And the Soviets, who of course beat us with the first woman in space and the second woman in space, once Kathy was named to be doing a spacewalk, they suddenly flew one of their women who did a spacewalk. Svetlana Savitskaya, right before Kathy's chance.
Who also copped Sally's chance to be the first woman to fly twice.
Right.
They studiously followed our press releases and made sure that they copped the first. And
so Kathy's named to a flight. Sally is on the flight, first flight with 2 women on, first American flight with 2 women, first flight with 2 women on it. You're now training for your EVA, and you and Dave Liesma, another mission specialist, are going to be the spacewalkers. And everything is going along fine until the moment when you have to do your simulation.
Yeah, so you train in successively more complex building blocks, and we reach a moment in the training flow where a full-sized mock-up of the space shuttle, and in particular very high fidelity inside the crew cabin. It's been stowed with all the spacewalking gear precisely as it will be stowed for our flight. And we take our checklist for doing all of this, and we go out there, and we're going to spend an entire day time compressing all the steps that start from the very first moment you take some of the gear out and get it ready the day before a spacewalk, all of the steps up to putting on the spacesuit, getting in the airlock, depressurizing the suit, the whole thing, just all the time delays compressed out. So you can imagine you walk out there in street clothes into the simulator and you're getting everything laid out and arranged, and then you reach a step in the checklist that says don LCVG. That's NASA parlance for put on the liquid cooling garment that you wear underneath the spacesuit.
The one that Sandra Bullock did not wear.
The one that Sandra Bullock did not wear, yes. Trust me, it does not look like her undergarments. She would never have consented to appear on screen looking this way. But you also don't get outside a real spacecraft with what she had on.
Right.
So there we are, and it's long johns with water tubes sewn into them, very clumsy-looking long johns. And Dave and I have hauled them out of the locker, and we're standing facing the drawers. We're each holding these, and I realize our entire training team, which is like 6 men, has gone dead silent. And you realize they're thinking, I know exactly what happens now. The guys strip down and put on the long johns, and then the sort of blink has hit, and I said, oh, I have no idea how this works now. and we're in a space, you could fit 3 crew modules on this dais, so we're in a really tiny space. And 5 guys dive out of the crew module right away, so don't want to be here for this. I don't know how this is going to work. And I look at Dave and said, Dave, let me tell you my views on modesty at times like this. And he goes, okay. And I said, I have none. And he said, fine. And he starts peeling off his shirt, and we just changed. You just changed. And it was, guys, you can come back in now. But it was just this sort of, oh my goodness, how does this work? Kind of just like it always used to work, actually.
So you got by that.
We got by that.
Okay. Tell us about, talk a little bit about the launch. And I think people endlessly want to hear what it feels like to go up.
Well, launch day is just an all-around pretty amazing thing. I mean, The vehicle, I'd worked up the Cape helping other people's gear get ready for a number of times before I finally got to fly. And one of the amazing things is the way the vehicle acts once it's fueled before launch. And I think anyone who's been on a launch pad when it's fueled, that means when it is a live, ready-to-go bomb, by the way. So we're talking, hefty stuff. But the vehicle is alive. I mean, it's loaded with super cold propellants. That's making all the metal shrink and adjust and creak. Things are venting off the auxiliary power units. It's a 200-foot tall building on this big scaffold. And you walk across this little tiny bridge that's, again, about as wide as half of this dais, and stand in the gap between the fixed tower and the vehicle. And the vehicle is alive. You just have this sense that it is ready to go and it wants to leave.
It's like a wild animal.
It is like a wild animal that's chained down, and it wants to go. So, I mean, it starts with that as you walk across the access arm, and it's now, it's your launch day. And our crews would always tease a little bit as you drive out to the launch pad, which you've done several times in training. You drive out, you do a training run, you drive back. And we'd look at the vehicle as we came on up. It's early dawn, so it's dramatically lit with these arc lights. It looks like a diamond sparkling in the night. And we'd look at each other and say, we're not driving off the launch pad this time. Okay, this time we leave straight up. We're not driving off. And then you walk across the access arm and just have a moment to take all of that in. And you get strapped in, and then it gets a little dull because the flight crew is not doing things during the launch countdown. The Kennedy Space Center crew is doing things. And I mean, we're seriously not doing anything, and I would actually take brief naps because it's going to get real. 8.5 minutes after launch, it's going to get really busy. So you sort of chill.
And you're describe your lying.
You're lying on your back. So the other thing is, imagine walking in this door, except now the whole room is tilted this way, and so suddenly you have to.
It's like you're in a dentist chair.
It's
right?
like 90 degrees of a dentist chair. Yeah.
Right.
So you're strapped in, it's not entirely comfortable, and you've got a couple hours to wait while they go through all the choreography that'll get you off the planet. And you would think as you get closer to launch, the odds are increasing that you're going to go. But actually, they're decreasing, if anything, because the number of things being checked, the frequency that they're being checked with, and the precision that they have to be set with keeps getting steeper and steeper. So it actually, as you would expect, gets harder closer to launch. You start doing irreversible things 6 minutes before launch, turning on auxiliary power units. You fire up the main engines about 6 seconds before liftoff, so the computers can check that they're running at full speed. And then you fire the solid rocket motors, which is set off a firecracker. You cannot stop solid rocket motors. So this is, once the guys launch something on 4th of July, it's going to explode. That's what this is. So you are leaving at that point, for sure. And what it feels like inside is a little bit of a rumble when the main engines start, and then just a push in your back when the solids go. It's a very sharp, quick departure. It's not bone crushing. We don't want to have to build all the hardware we're carrying super strong. So the shuttle's designed to not put anything to more than 3 Gs. And it's 3 Gs coming this way through your body, which is very easy to bear physiologically. So first stage is like being inside a dumpster on a shake table. I mean, you're really being shaken a lot. You're inside the outer skin of the orbiter and another pressure vessel and a sound suppressing helmet, and it's still really loud. And that goes on for about 2.25 minutes. And then you drop the solid rockets off, and you've got another 6 minutes of continued acceleration on the main engines, but now it's like the world's smoothest electric train. There's almost no vibration. Someone is still pushing on your chair. I mean, you're still accelerating, and what you feel is the acceleration. Everything's speeding up 0 to 17,500 miles an hour in 8.5 minutes, so roughly you go 2,000 miles an hour faster every minute for 8.5 consecutive minutes. And it's Wednesday, we'll do rough math, but.
So, weightlessness.
Outrageously fun. It's just outrageously fun.
Did you do the pencil thing that everybody does, sort of let your pencil go?
Well, I grew up flying little airplanes, so I grew up doing pencil things, at midnight over the LA basin. So I was looking for something a little more remarkable than pencil things. And gymnastics are the best thing. So everyone's a massively good gymnast in 0G. There's the sport of grabbing a colleague and hovering them out in the middle of the cabin somewhere where they're beyond arm's reach from anything. and you let them go really gently, and they can't escape. I mean, there's not enough mass to swim against it. So you just, you know, you've been bad. We'll come get you when we're ready to come get you.
You need something to push against in order to
You need something to push against, right.
It's not like breaststroking.
No, it's not. And then there are food games. Everyone knows Pepperidge Farm goldfish. Pepperidge Farm goldfish will display schooling behavior in zero gravity. You can pull the bag away and have your very own school of Pepperidge Farm goldfish. Air hockey with M&Ms. and your vocabulary changes. I mean, you don't say, I mean, this happens very quickly without thinking about it. In training, you would always say, hand me that camera, would you pass me that checklist? Almost instantly, when you get up there, you would say, send me the camera. And if Rebecca and I were this far away, you'd literally give the camera a bit of a toss and it would just glide across the cabin and you snag it out of the air. You do need to remember to undo that when you go home. There are a lot of stories of someone saying, here, it's being shocked that it ends up on their toe. And there are a few stories of someone waking up in the middle of the night and seeing the light of the commode across the way, and as they would do in the shuttle, just sort of pushing off from the bulkhead to float across and ending up on the floor.
Doesn't work.
Doesn't work the same.
Everybody I've talked to who has been in space adores weightlessness, but of course you were not there just to have fun, and the spacewalk, the EVA, was not a playtime. You did serious work, but that first look back at Earth, that first view must have been down and up, or up and down, depending where you were.
So my first glimpse was actually right at main engine cutoff. And I was on the flight deck, and you've done hundreds of ascent simulations before you get there, and on 98 of them, you've died, because the instructors throw in things that go wrong. At the start of the training flow, they give you one that says, here's what it ought to look like. And right before you leave, they give you one, say, here's what's it probably going to look like on launch day. In between, they try to kill you. And so you're sort of really watching all the instruments very carefully. And when the main engines finally cut off, I looked up over John McBride's shoulder, and we were inverted. So the Earth was down here, and just got this 6-window full panorama of the Atlantic Ocean and white clouds up over England, which is actually another funny story. So it's 0 to 17,500 miles an hour in 8.5 minutes. It's also Kennedy Space Center, Florida, to over England in 8.5 minutes. So Bob Crippen keys the microphone.
The commander of the mission.
To report to Houston the routine call, main engines have cut off, here's our speed, in NASA gobbledygook. And he says that. And we're expecting Houston to come back with a little drawl of sort of, Roger, welcome to space. And this really angry British voice hops up on the radio. And right down there, 200 miles, some Royal Air Force guys are training on an Air Force range, and one of the frequencies that we just transmitted on, they are using, and they think they own. And so we got chewed out by the Royal Air Force for barging in. And we were trying to compose a really snappy reply to say back to this guy, and by the time we came up with one, we were over Africa. So
well, get your priorities straight is what I would have said.
But at any rate, I looked up and I saw that sight, and it literally took my breath away, and I blurted, wow, look at that. And Crippen, of course, said, no, not yet. We're still in the checklist.
So once you got outside, what's the difference being outside and being inside? 30 years ago, come Saturday,
yep,
you're out there.
What's really cool about it is you're wearing your spacesuit, your spaceship. In miniature, in the backpack of the suit is all of the same kind of gear that makes the shuttle work and keep you alive. So it has to hold pressure. It has to circulate oxygen for you to breathe. It's all oxygen so that you can work at a lower pressure. It has to pump the water that's running through your cooling garment. It has to pump that around so that it can remove the heat of your exercise from the body and vent it out to space. And you're the pilot of your own spaceship. The other cool thing is there's no window frame. And as fabulous as it is to look out 6 big panoramic windows at the Earth, it's even better to be able to move the spaceship out of the way and just see it, or literally look down at your toes and see Venezuela sliding by between your boots. And the work you do if you're out on a spacewalk is usually fascinating in its own right. It's sort of giant tinker toys in space in a sense, but it's really interesting, complex work to do. We had a very simple engineering experiment that was looking at the technical capabilities and the tools of refueling satellites. So it was not as dramatic as some of the big spacewalks.
Well, but you were carrying hydrazine, which everybody was very concerned about.
We were carrying real live propellant, really dangerous propellant. You know, if you put one drop of the propellant on a table here and let it vaporize in this room, we'd all be sick. I mean, it's exceedingly toxic. It explodes really easily. And one of the worries was if any of it leaked from the system we were working with, it would crystallize into a white ice crystal and could adhere on the white skin of our spacesuit, and you wouldn't know it until you came back in and pressurized the airlock, which would let that ice crystal vaporize, which would get everybody sick. So we had a very elaborate procedure inside the airlock to take out chemical sniffers and make sure that we hadn't accidentally brought something in. And both Dave and I had to, besides being very attuned to working quite precisely with these custom-built tools, we also had to be very alert for watching for leaks. Mm-hmm. So it was a fairly, the planned purpose that took us out was that fairly simple refueling task. But the other backstory to the spacewalk was it was supposed to be done on like day 3 or 4 of the mission. But we had a major communications antenna fail the first day of the mission that was critical to the biggest payload on board. So we had to jury rig a way to let that antenna continue to work. The trick there was the antenna needed to be positioned just so and then folded back inside the orbiter to come back home. And that now could not be done without another jury rig and someone manually moving the antenna to the right position to get it locked. And so we pushed the spacewalk to basically the day before entry. So Dave and I spent 5 days figuring this spacewalk is actually never going to happen. It keeps slipping. The world doesn't like to do spacewalks right before you come home. Something else will crop up and cancel it. And we finally got outside and did both the antenna task and the
Did you spend most of your time looking out or looking back at Earth?
We spent most of our time doing our work.
Okay, I appreciate that.
On the spacewalk in particular.
Right, but what, I know that what you saw from space so changed the trajectory of your own life as well. What did you see in Earth when you did look back at Earth?
Yeah, my main focus, I think almost everybody's, was to look back at Earth. I mean, you are above the atmosphere. The stars they are spectacular, but they struck me as not that unlike an amazing night in the high mountains. So not so wildly different than any other way I'd ever seen the stars. The way we could see the Earth was incredibly different. I mean, you're going around it entirely in an hour and a half. You get a sunrise or a sunset every 45 minutes. You can either see extraordinary panoramas, literally a continent at a time out your office window, or really look more closely and see remarkably fine detail. We saw a great dust storm coming off the continent of North Africa, and you could trace tendrils of that as far as Bermuda with the naked eye, just fine little filigree of dust all the way across. So that was, to me, really, really entrancing. And what accumulated, and I think it didn't really crystallize in final form to my third flight, I mean, grew up as a geologist and oceanographer. I'd been fascinated with maps from this tall. So to be able to actually see the Earth with my own eyes that way was, beyond a capstone experience, to put it mildly. But what accumulated by my third flight was an underlying dissatisfaction if all that was for was I got the cool view. It wasn't enough for me to say, well, I have the neat pictures and I have the cool view and I can tell the stories and that's pretty cool. Somehow it fired in me a drive to figure out how do you make this matter? How do you make the fact that we're the first generation of human beings that can view the Earth from that perspective? Not only with these eyes, but with electronic eyes that let us really understand the characteristics of things, map our oceans, understand the seafloor, map the continents, track the weather on a daily basis. We are the first generation of human beings that have that capability, and it's transformed how we understand the planet, and it's really transformed our ability to develop foresight predictions from the weather predictions. We've got Louis Uccellini, my colleague who runs NOAA's National Weather Service here today. Weather forecasting, as we know, it's not possible without the ability to measure the whole globe almost as a snapshot and then propagate that out by computers. That was impossible until the space age. Anybody here not have heard of the El Nino? We didn't understand the El Nino was a basin scale temperature effect in the Pacific Ocean until the satellite era, where you could essentially see the whole Pacific Ocean at once. So that's an extraordinary thing, and what it really generated in me is I don't want to just be someone who's talking at country clubs and showing my slides and telling all of you how cool it is to look at the Earth from space. There's got to be a way to really help drive that home and make it actually matter in the lives, the plans, the safety, the well-being of people back on Earth. And that really, sincerely, is what keeps drawing me to NOAA's mission, because NOAA is where all the investments we make as a country and as a globe in understanding the Earth or in sensing it from space, we're where the taxpayer starts to get their return on investment. We literally touch 300 million Americans a day with the environmental intelligence that we create out of these flows of data.
This phrase, environmental intelligence, you would put it right up there with military intelligence, with any other intelligence.
Yeah, it's broadly of the same cloth. It's assimilating a wide array of knowledge into a perspective or into a frame of reference that's pertinent to decisions that are being made. So it's about informing decisions with a broad array of information.
Give us the link from the big purview, what NOAA can do to get the decision-making down to one individual to whom it might make a difference.
Oh, there are lots of ways to do it. Let me try to do quickly two of those. So Craig Fugate runs the National Federal Emergency Management Agency, and if a hurricane's bearing down towards the coast of the United States, he's watching the weather forecast. And his job is, who do I need to evacuate, from where, when, and where do I need to pre-position supplies to respond after the fact. So he turns to us, to Louis Uccellini, and also to our National Ocean Service to get the forecast, which starts with satellite information, tide gauges, current meters, computer modeling. So you have to have the fundamental understanding of how Earth processes work. That's the result of decades of investment in the exacting work of not just measuring what's out there, but understanding how does this come about. You embody that in computer models. You pour in current timely measurements, and you use the laws of physics to say, if this is what the state of things is today, what will it be in 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours? Craig Fugate, when there's at day 4 of a forecast, he's wanting to know who to evacuate or not. So he's looking to us to provide 85 to 90% reliable prediction. The hurricane's going to go here. The storm surge is going to be of this kind of magnitude. And he sets in motion the whole cascade of FEMA plans around that. The other example that I really take a lot of inspiration out of is 5 years ago, the United States provided both global scale weather models and longer time frame climate models to the government of India, and hosted some of their meteorologists at our National Centers for Environmental Prediction to teach them how to use these tools to their benefit. So they had a large typhoon hit a stretch of the Indian coast last year, I think it was, in which the big story was tens of thousands of people moved out of harm's way and some few tens of casualties. The same coastline was struck in 1999, and the story was tens of thousands of casualties. They didn't have the foresight, they didn't have the warning, and they didn't have the confidence built up in the national decision makers or in the public to say, hey, this hasn't happened yet. The sky is still clear outside, by the way. But trust me, you need to start doing this now because, and that people would actually find that reliable enough and prove it enough to factor it into their decision making.
So you're saving lives. You're changing the economy so that people know, farmers know what to plant when, that kind of thing.
Supply chain, you think of the last couple major winter storms. If you've been inconvenienced by getting a text message from your airline canceling your flight before you went to the airport, that's so they didn't have 50,000 people stranded in airports with the public health and other hazards, which we used to see routinely even just 5 years ago. Because again, the aviation weather forecasts, which again, our NOAA aviation weather forecasts from our center in Kansas City, are reliable enough. They go to the United Airlines and American Airlines system operation hubs, and those guys look 3 and 4 days down the road and start making plans for, let's not strand equipment here, let's not strand passengers here. The weather should lift out by Thursday. Right. Let's have all our equipment in the best possible place to start the system up rapidly. They have insight, foresight, intelligence to shape those decisions with. In doing some research on this, I'm finding it very hard to sort of wrap my arms around the amount of data that you deal with, the number of people, the number of ships and planes that are gathering this data. I'm quoting you here, NOAA collects at least 20 terabytes of data every day, twice the size
of the entire printed collection of the Library of Congress, but only a tenth of that is easily accessible to the public. So you're bringing in all this information. What are the challenges? What are your priorities right now?
Well, we've got 4 priorities right now. We need to continue to invest in observational infrastructure. The work we're talking about is not a data mining problem. This is not measure it once and just reanalyze it for more statistical insight. So the satellites, buoys, ships, airplanes, it's taking the pulse of the planet on a regular basis that makes possible what I'm talking about here. So we need to continue in appropriate investments in our observational infrastructure. There are technological and methodology challenges in the National Weather Service that stem from the speed with which technology has advanced compared to the rate at which we've been able to keep up with that. We need to respond to that and the changing needs for environmental information in the country by evolving the National Weather Service. A large focal point of what we're talking about here falls under our 3rd goal, which is to provide the information and services that help communities become more resilient. And that's really what we've been talking about here. American Airlines being more resilient with the winter storm bearing down on them, able to take it with less inconvenience, less economic disruption, less health and safety disruption to the flying public, and get back into business quickly afterwards. But it's also coastal ecosystems that shelter shorelines from storms and provide habitat for fish and marine species. It's the drought-stricken areas of California. How do we help provide the information that we can't prevent Mother Nature doing what she's going to do, but help us understand, prepare for, adapt to, and respond to the blows that are coming our way.
You're just trying to protect the whole planet.
Why not?
Why not, indeed? And we should also point out that you not only walked in space and flew in the shuttle 3 times, but you also did some time under the ocean. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, my first path through life was headed towards being a deep sea geology oceanographer. And at the same time that the NASA selection was pending, I actually had a postdoctoral fellowship to go to Lamont Doherty Institution in Columbia and become one of the diving scientists in the little Alvin submersibles that would go down and look at the volcanic geology of the deep sea floor. So I was going to win either way on that selection. But the wheel ended up turning around in my favor in the end anyhow, and so I've had the opportunity on a Pisces submersible off Bermuda and an Alvin on the famous geology of the Eastern Pacific Ocean to go down and actually take a look at some of those really miraculous deep sea vents and volcanic terrains.
How long were you?
Was actually splitting apart.
How long were you under the sea?
The longest of those dives was my Alvin dive in the Pacific, and it's about a 14-hour day. It descends slowly like a dirigible and comes back up like that, and it crawls around on the seafloor. And we got an extra couple hours on the bottom because the ship had something go wrong while we were on the seafloor that meant they couldn't lift us back out of the water. So they wanted us to stay safely on the bottom of the ocean while they figured out how to lift us out. Otherwise, they were going to have to tow us on the open water back to Acapulco. So we were quite ready to sit down on the bottom and wait for a while and see if they could fix the winch.
We're going to open this up to questions from the audience in just a minute, but let me just give you a chance for now to say what a lot of people here who are with Pew and are doing such extraordinary work, doing it through the government, through private industry, whatever. I guess the question I want to ask is, what can people do? What should we be thinking about in terms of protecting planet Earth and making sure that we survive, that our children and grandchildren and all the next generations do as well?
Look, the Earth will be fine. The Earth has been through dramatic change through geologic time. It's changing rapidly around us now, and there's no question that the planet will be fine. The question is both the societies that we've built, the economies we've built, and us as a species. We've come into being in a certain happy equilibrium of things, and there are worrisome signs that our activity on the planet and the scale of the human imprint on the planet is contributing to the changes and accelerating some of the changes that could push us out of that equilibrium, dangerously out of that equilibrium. You all hear the idyllic and idealistic response from astronauts that you finally see it all as one planet, as one closed system, and there are no boundaries. The first 2 statements are true, but you'd have to be trying, if you look out a spacecraft window, you'd have to be trying to not notice bound political borders. You can see several of them. You'd have to be trying to not notice the hand of man. I mean, Beijing, New York, Paris are big gray smudges, against a green or other backdrop. So, I actually also came home clearly with that impression, that we are an intelligent tool-making species. And when we focus intention and energy and resources on something, we leave very visible fingerprints on the planet. And we're leaving some less visible fingerprints as well in the acidity of the ocean and the changing chemistry of the atmosphere. So what can, A, be mindful of it, A, try to make the public dialogue more constructive and more focused on actions that we can take, B, in our own way at whatever scale we can work. It is possible to live more lightly on this planet without devastating human economies. So we're going to have to look at that. But it is complex. It goes up against values and cultures and the natural human desire for growth and for improvement of people's lives. So it's going to be complex.
But keep in mind that you have eyes in the sky watching all of us.
We have eyes in the sky watching all of us.
We can go on for hours. We won't. But we'd love some questions from you folks, if there are any questions from the audience. Yes, Senator.
Where are we today as a nation in overall space? And where, in your judgment, should we be if we didn't have to deal with sequester and budgets and so forth? And thirdly, what international participation other than Russia is really of major significance now in carrying the cost burden? Because what you produce is shared 360 degrees with the whole world.
Right. In NOAA's domain, stemming from the origins of the weather business, there's a century and a half of open sharing among nations of the weather measurements, because no nation can do weather forecasting without measurements from around the globe. And that continues to this day into the space age. So the satellite systems that we use to make the weather measurements, we have 2 different satellites to measure the Earth at 2 different times a day. By arrangement, long-standing arrangement with our European partners, the United States designs and builds and flies one of those, and Europe does the other. So we bear essentially half the satellite cost. And we all share the data, and we all share modeling and other capabilities, because it's in the interest of basically global public safety. Where are we as a nation today? We're working through an interesting phase in the launch market with the likes of Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and others to try to reestablish a lower price point for getting things off the planet, up the first 200 miles or so. The other competitors in the launch market are the French, the Russians, and the Chinese, basically. Those are the 3 big ones. And so our suppliers ended up kind of priced out of the market over the last decades or so. And that's part of what we're trying to change through things like the SpaceX effort and NASA's.
Are in those foreign countries that you named, is that government or is that commercial?
That's principally government. Arianespace is a bit of a hybrid commercial and governmental entity. So that's one thing. There's an interesting set of likely changes underway, but not yet proven in the launch market. Can Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk really build systems that will gain the kind of reliability and prove the kind of reliability that the Air Force and NASA and we need to launch critical payloads? That story's in progress. Related to that story is, for the moment, the United States does not have a booster of our own that is certified to take people off the planet. So we are reliant on the Russians to take people back and forth to the International Space Station. That will continue for some time, and even some of the American-supplied boosters that are flying now do use Russian engines. So it's a pretty complex and very interwoven launch market. Where would I like us to be? A completely unofficial answer. I'm the kid that wanted to go to Mars from the beginning. So put my name on the top of that list. But that's the geologist in me wanting to go see the great big volcanoes, and the explorer in me believing that although robots can do a lot of things, there is value at the end of it. It is a human quest to explore and understand. And at some point, I'm the kind of person that wants to and needs to go, not just look at the data and make it an intellectual proposition. I think that kind of exploration is and always will be more than an intellectual proposition.
And all those kids on the Mars flight are going to need a graybeard there to tell them what to do.
Sign me up. I'll be done, Mother.
We had another question over here somewhere? Yes, sir. Josh?
NOAA is NOAA is really split into two kind of parts. One is the weather business, and the other one is fisheries. Does that make sense?
I actually don't agree with that dichotomy. NOAA is founded to be about the atmosphere and the oceans and the interlinkages and the dynamics between them. So there's a classic dichotomy. People talk about the wet and the dry of NOAA, and one reason we've cast ourselves around the notion of resilience is because it really is time to break through that overly restrictive and I think false dichotomy. So we've got, for example, some of our best atmospheric modeling experts now embedded with our fisheries service to try to really accelerate our progress, bring ocean capability and modeling and forecasting closer to par with what we can do in the atmosphere these days. It's decades behind. It's a long quest, but at some point what you'd like to get to in managing fisheries is not just some statistical sampling of fish in the sea now and a retrospective statistical look on the basis of what you set a next year catch. You'd like to be able to integrate more of the environmental factors that are really affecting the population and maybe even get some genuine predictive capability. So I think I think we need to move past that dichotomy.
Everything is so, what you're describing, obviously, is so interconnected, and a concept that we sort of started thinking about in the 70s when the ecology movement started and things have consequences. Obviously, globalism and everybody working together is one of the goals here. You talked a little bit about that in response to the Senator's question, but in terms of the environment, is there global cooperation right now, or are there not pockets of resistance where people just don't want to deal with it?
But globalism's a little too broad a word to really parse that on, because there certainly are particular issues on which there are differences of view among nations and among regions, but there are others in which there's some consistency of view. So one of the efforts NOAA has driven for a long time, for example, is around free and open data exchange of the foundational environmental data, for example, the weather data that goes into a forecast. That has powered lots of companies. I mean, NOAA's 2 terabytes, the 20 terabytes we produce are findable, it's just hard. But the 2 terabytes we put out, that's what the weather company, AccuWeather, WSI, anybody that does the app or the graphics in your newspaper, on your television, on your smartphone, they're taking NOAA products, they're not originating those products, and they're just bringing them to you more attuned to what you need. So you've got what NOAA does as an open innovation platform that's fueling all of that. And we've made a lot of work, a lot of efforts, and a lot of progress in the last decades through the Group on Earth Observations and other multilateral efforts to bring other countries into that arena, to share satellite data streams, to share in situ data, again, so that globally anyone can get at data sets that help us understand particular phenomena, particular challenges. Where do you see lack of cooperation or differences of view? Certainly see it in some fisheries management issues. Around whales, for example, Iceland and Japan continue whaling practices that much of the rest of the world, through the International Whaling Commission, would prefer to rule out. You see it in some regional fisheries, which are who owns which waters, what kind of economic return should I be able to get, and what's the balance with conservation and protection of the environment and the asset itself that should be put into play. Certainly see it in the carbon debate, specifically around emissions of carbon. Are man-made emissions important or not? Should they be reduced or not? That's become very politicized in this country, much less so in some other countries.
If you have your priorities as the administrator of NOAA, and you've talked about that, transparency, economic resilience, getting more of the data collected and get it out there. What about personally? What in your heart, if you could wave your magic wand and get one thing changed or make one thing better or fix one thing, what would it be? Where is that?
Well, I'd be very focused right now on the work I'm doing at NOAA. So if I could make one thing easier, I would take a magic wand and do 3 streamlining strokes of different aspects of federal process around around the way we treat our people, around the way we hire and retain and reward our people. We're doing a horrendous disservice to people who serve in federal government right now, and it's completely undeserved. popular sport. I guess it makes for good headlines to sound very jaded and jaundiced, but it's an incredible disservice. And I think we continue it at our peril, by the way, if we're denigrating public service to that degree. I'd certainly streamline some things around budgeting, with all due respect, Senator. It's a lot easier to run a business if you get a budget approved on a timely basis than if you get one 10 days before the end of the fiscal year. And, you know, I might settle for those too.
And that would be a real magic
be a real
wand if you
victory.
could get those things done, I must say. Are there any other questions from the group? Yes, one more, and then we'll close it out. Go ahead.
Thank you both for this fantastic conversation. Dr. Sullivan, what would you think, what needs to change, if anything, in fisheries sustainability for us as a species to continue consuming seafood the way we've become accustomed to in the past 30, 40 years? Do you think the way, with the stasis as it is now, that we could continue ad infinitum, or do you think something would need to change fairly dramatically in the near future?
I think the kicker in your question is the phrase "to continue consuming the way we've been consuming now." I mean, look at global population growth, look at the consumption rates of seafood, look at the industrial scale fishing pressure that brings on some species. I think it is very challenging whether that is sustainable or not. So I think you've got a couple options. You're going to have to look at setting catch rates that really allow stocks to replenish and sustain themselves, and that may ripple back through the supply chain in terms of total availability and quantity of certain species available. And then there is the question of what scale of production can aquaculture really deliver, and can it do that in an intrinsically sustainable way? I mean, cultivating salmon and other carnivorous fish, you harvest other fish that no one cares about by name out of the ocean in vast numbers to grind them up to make fish meal, to feed to the pigs and the chicken and the pets and the salmon that you do care about, which a colleague of mine years ago during the Pew Ocean Commission, likened that to clear cut the forests to harvest the songbirds and grind them up into protein meal for the cows. It's a sort of, it's a sort of intrinsically nonsensical proposition. So getting the energy balance of that right is going to be one of the key tricks. And again, the forage fish, the middle of the food chain that tends to be fished out to supply the fish meal, it's not restaurant stuff. It doesn't have popular names. It's, it's sort of a blind, a hidden, an unnamed fish in the who cares category. But, food webs are food webs. The word web matters. And so if you take large swaths of the center of a food web out of play, you're really going to alter the ecosystem in fundamental ways.
Well, who knew that science and space could be so much fun? We want to thank you both. You asked the question of how does NOAA touch each American's life. My husband and I are blessed to live on the water, and before we consult the news or anything in the morning, we're on one of NOAA's sites, because it matters in how we live our lives, and I know that's true for all Americans. So for the great work that you and your colleagues do, and I think it was said well, the call to public service is the nation's highest. So for those of you who are willing to serve, Senator, you and many others, we owe you a great debt of thanks. So thanks for being here today, and thank you all.